to this reality. So anyway, that's the project that I work on. I'll just tell you a little bit maybe about myself first of all. I teach mostly game development courses in DIT, but also I teach in the School of Computing. So I'm teaching second year object-oriented programming students, first year programming students basically how to code. And what I try and do is I try and incorporate a sort of a technique or like a branch of computer science called creative coding. So creative coding is the idea that you can use code like a medium, like an art medium, like for example painting or an instrument. You can use code basically to express your deepest inner thoughts and emotions, and also you can use it to create beautiful things. So that's what I'm trying to get my students to do. I really like the idea of creative coding, because not only is it about making beautiful things with code, but it's also the idea that you don't need to know everything when you start a project. You kind of like discover through experience, you know, hopefully what you need to learn. I try and encourage my students, I often talk to my students about the idea of flow states, which you might have heard of. Have you heard of the idea of flow states, Cheslensky's flow states? Yeah. So this is the kind of idea that you can kind of get deeply immersed in a task to the sort of exclusion of, you know, all other things. And sometimes you forget to eat, you spend hours and hours just completely absorbed in a task. And this is really, I think, the best way to kind of learn, you know, when you're in this flow state, you're completely focused. Yeah, it's kind of colloquially referred to as being in the zone. So I'm always trying to get my students to get into the zone. That's where I think the best learning happens. These are just some examples of the student assignments and the type of work that my computer science students do. So the one at the top there, that's a hood for a sci-fi device. So what I'm getting my students to do is make things like hoods for warp drives and for engine systems. And they have to basically program the user experience in code. So there's no drawing tools or anything. They're basically trying to conceptualize and develop their skills that sort of like computational thinking. These ones at the bottom here, these were the theme of these assignments. These are first year programming students, and these guys are doing something beautiful to enjoy whilst listening to music. I wanted them to pick their favorite piece of music and go off and code something beautiful which kind of expresses their emotions and what they feel when they're listening to a piece of music. I think this is a great way for people to learn. The whole idea with this creative coding thing, this is Randy Polish, who's a VR researcher from Carnegie Mellon. He's dead now, but he came up with this concept called a head fake. The head fake is the idea that people can learn difficult and complicated things. In my case, it's object-oriented programming and computational thinking, but they do it by doing something fun, so they don't realize they're actually learning the hard stuff. It's called a head fake. I try to incorporate this into everything that I teach. Sometimes my students come up to me after an assignment, like one of my students came up to me and said, oh, I got into a really deep flow state when I was working on that assignment. I went to bed, I was dreaming about it, and I woke up the next day and I found all the solutions to all of these technical problems. That's what flow state is all about. It's another kind of altered state of consciousness. So that's just a little bit about me and the work that I do in DIT. The talk that I'm going to give you guys today is all about psychedelics and virtual reality. So these are two things which have maybe played a very significant part in my life really over the last 2 years. And why I think this is a relevant thing for you guys, there's 3 reasons. First of all, I think we're going through a psychedelic renaissance in the last few years. You know, there was this big, I reckon there's three periods when psychedelic use was like prominent. There's the archaic use in cultures like in Peru, you know, indigenous cultures. There's the 1960s, then there's this big psychedelic movement, particularly in California. Timothy Leary promoted the psychedelic experience of Beatles, and then in 1971 it all stopped. All the research stopped and everything with the Controlled Substances Act. But now we're having a psychedelic renaissance as well. The research that's coming in now is helping us to understand what happens in the human brain when people have a psychedelic experience. People experience a sense of oneness and transcendence. What actually happens in the human brain? There's a conference called Psychedelic Science, and a lot of really interesting research. There's a lot of great work being done in Imperial College in London, where they have people take psychedelics and then they do MRI scans of the brain so they can understand what's actually happening in the brain. This research has been reported in the mainstream media as well, so you can read articles about this in The Guardian, in the Irish Times. Also, microdosing. How many people have heard of the concept of microdosing? Can you just put up your hands if you've heard of it? So microdosing is a big trend, particularly amongst creative people and technical people. It's the idea that you can take a sub-perceptual dose of a psychedelic substance, like 10 micrograms or 20 micrograms of LSD, and you don't have a psychedelic experience, but you experience some improvement in cognition, in creativity, in presence. And this is really popular around the world. I pitched a talk to a bloggers conference called Republica, and one was all about virtual reality, the other was all about psychedelics. And said, oh, you have to do the one about psychedelics. And all the brilliant creative people are microdosing. So it's a big trend around the world. And then also psychedelic culture is kind of becoming like mainstream culture. And I'll give a couple of examples. There's a few festivals every year. For example, Boom Festival in Portugal. This is a 9-day psychedelic arts festival. And 50,000, 100,000, 50,000 I think is roughly how many people go. I got to a festival this year called Azora in Hungary. And it's called a psychedelic tribal gathering. And in my opinion, it's the most beautiful, psychedelic, conscious people from all around Europe come together, dance together to psytrance, learn from each other. It's a really, really beautiful festival. Also, this is the year of commercial VR headsets. So that's why I think we're undergoing a psychedelic renaissance. VR headsets came out in the last few years. And I've been working on VR projects for, I think, maybe since 2013. Since the DK1, first generation Oculus Rift prototype headsets came out. Also for me in the last couple of years, lots of really important personal things happened in my life. Most significantly, I moved into this beautiful building on Parliament Street in Dublin with my husband Derek. We lived together for the last 12 years on the north side of Dublin, very happily in a little house. And then we moved into this fabulous building. My husband's renovating as a wine bar. It was all offices when we started out. And so I've seen this building transformed from an office building into this beautiful, colourful Georgian building with lots of original features and chandeliers and cornicings. This is like kind of psychedelic. You know, just walking up or waking up in the morning, looking around at my house, feels like everything is really beautiful and intense. Also, I worked on these two VR projects. Right, VR is, you know, something that can teach us a lot about our true nature. And also, you know, it's also a kind of an altered thing. You put on a headset and then suddenly you're transported to a different, somebody else's different generated reality. And I also joined the Psychedelic Society of Ireland. I guess most of the stuff in that happened in the last year. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Psychedelic Society. Oh, hang on, before that, of course, how many people have seen this movie? So this is a homage to psychedelics. This is, you know, there's a time when, like really at the start of the movie, the Doctor Strange has what a lot of people describe as like a DMT experience. DMT is dimethyltryptamine, a very, very strong psychedelic, and it feels like he's traveling down a tunnel and transported to different dimensions. And has his consciousness altered in a very profound way. Yeah, this is what happens in the Psychedelic Society, right? So we don't take psychedelics at our events. These people are basically, I would consider these awakened beings, right? These are people who are really interested in exploring their consciousness in lots of different ways, through psychedelic substances, but also through meditation, through yoga, mindfulness. And you were interested in talking about this. You don't have casual conversations with these people about like what happened in Fair City last night. This is all meaning of life stuff. This is what we talk about at our events. But they're vegan, co-created suppers. Everyone brings food. We share food together, and we basically just have lots of very profound conversations. And we sit around. This is just one of our events. Also, sometimes we have events where we bring art. You know, people are doing paintings, poetry. I bring some VR projects and show people inspired by psychedelic experiences. And what else can I say about them? Yeah, we also organised a chill-out space at a festival called Decompression earlier this year. And this was like the only dry place in 2 days of torrential rain. People take their shoes off. Again, no substances in the space, just a place for people to come and chill at a festival, a quiet space. So this was the space that we organised. Also, one of my friends, Garrett from the Psychedelic Society, runs a thing called Psychedelic Therapy. So this combines hiking and psychedelics. So we take a small dose of magic mushrooms, about 0.5 of a gram, which is just a heightening dose. It's a dose which kind of opens your senses, makes you more open to nature. And we go on a big hike together. Usually these are like full day events. And then there's lots of different stages to the psychedelic therapy events as well. These are really healing days, you know. So, also 2 of our members got to go to Psychedelic Science in Oakland this year, which is one of the two big academic conferences where people are presenting peer-reviewed studies on, for example, the therapeutic use of psychedelics, and also, again, the brain imaging scans and stuff like this. So this is Kira Sherlock, the founder of the Psychedelic Society, and this is Eleanor Hung, who participated in psychedelic science on behalf of the conference. So there's just a little bit more about what brought me to this point of giving talks about psychedelics at VR. In my talk, I'm going to quote a lot two figures who are really important to me, and they're, I guess, two psychedelic evangelists from the 20th century who are very influential, I guess, in sort of helping me to understand what a psychedelic experience is all about. First of all is Terence McKenna. Who's heard of Terence McKenna? Awesome! Two people in the room. So you should check out Terence McKenna's videos on YouTube. He was an ethnobotanist, and he studied psychedelic plants, right? So this was his area of expertise. He also was a really great commentator and observer of human culture. He wrote a book called The Food of the Gods, which is quite well known. And in this, he looked at the history of alcohol, the history of sugar, history of tobacco, the history of opium, and also the history of psychedelics, and looked to see how these things became prominent and why they're still used, or the different ways that they're used in human culture. Most famously, he's known for a book called True Hallucinations, which he wrote in 1972, actually, I'm not too sure if he wrote it, but it's set in 1972, and it describes him and his brother Dennis McKenna's journey along the Putumayo River in Peru. They were searching for a DMT-containing psychedelic plant called okayu, and instead they find these cubensis mushrooms, he says, psilocybin-containing mushrooms, and they basically just consume loads and loads of them over a period of about 3 weeks, and they have this really intense thing. It's hilarious. It's a really funny book, but also, I guess this is the thing he's most famous for. He has a lot of other interesting theories. One of his theories is the stoned ape theory, which maybe a lot of people, I think it has a certain amount of credence. It's the idea that humans basically gain the skills of language and abstract thought when they started consuming psychedelic mushrooms. And this is the thing that brought human species from, hunter-gatherer apes to, making cave paintings, and then the capability for abstract thought, and also the capability to have language. He was a great believer in the concept of the felt presence of direct experience. By that, I mean you have to gnosis, knowledge through experience, right? And that's what a psychedelic experience is knowledge. So it brings you to different levels of your own consciousness. This is within your own capacity to experience. But he thinks you can't read about psychedelic experiences, you've got to do them. You've got to have them, have the experience, and by that you are kind of altered and you're changed. You can't unsee the things that you see, you can't unexperience those. I'm also a great believer in this concept of the felt presence of direct experience when it comes to programming. So this is why I tell my students, you can't learn programming from a book. Don't bother buying the Java programming book. Instead, just code as much as you can. And by coding, you learn what it means to be a programmer and how to think like a programmer and all of the aspects of being a programmer. Maybe I will just give you one quote from Terence McKenna here. I'll see what I have. Oh, why is this mousey thing not coming up here? The mouse is on the wrong screen for some reason. Oh, here we go. It's on the right screen now. Okay, so let me see. He says, the emergence of language from mute beasts, which is only 100,000 years in the past, is as dramatic a miracle as anyone could imagine. The emergence of a planet instantaneously unified by electricity and media is as dramatic a miracle as anyone could imagine. And that's only 50 years ago, and that's in our past and still going on. We forget how much everything is changing. We forget how significant it is, and sometimes we lose our sense of awe about the fact that we're even alive, The fact that we're even evolved and we're conscious is a pretty amazing thing. Another really great inspiration for me is Timothy Leary. Many of you have heard of Timothy Leary? Who's heard of Timothy Leary? A few more people. Excellent. So Timothy Leary was a psychologist in Harvard in the 1960s. He was regarded as being one of the greatest psychologists in America at the time. And he started a project called the Harvard Psilocybin Project, which was to look at the effect of psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, to look at what the effect of that was on the human brain. So the study involved giving psilocybin to students. There's sort of legend that he got sacked from Harvard, but actually I think his contract just wasn't renewed after 3 years. So anyway, he left Harvard, And he went on to become a psychedelic evangelist, and he sort of came up with the phrase, turn on, tune in, and drop out. You might have heard of that phrase. And there's lots of videos, lots of talks. He was a great influencer of the Beatle and a great influencer of psychedelic thought and consciousness and counterculture in the 1960s. Let's see. In 1965, he commented that he had learned more about his brain and its possibilities and more about psychology in 5 hours after taking magic mushrooms than in the previous 15 years of studying and doing research in psychology. President Richard Nixon once described Leary as the most dangerous man in America. He described himself as a performing philosopher, so he's a great speaker and a great communicator of what the psychedelic experience is all about. So what is a psychedelic experience? Well, I'm going to base my description of the psychedelic experience on Timothy Leary's 1964 book, which is called The Psychedelic Experience. And this is a manual for how to have a psychedelic experience. It's based on the Bardo Phodol, which is an 8th century Buddhist manuscript that describes the journey of a soul after death and before rebirth. And it describes 3 phases of a psychedelic experience. But what else is in this book? Particularly it has affirmations, right? Because the thing about psychedelics is they're not uppers or downers. They're not like taking coke or drinking alcohol. They're not going to make you feel happy. They're very much going to be directed based on your intention, based on what you expect the psychedelic experience to be. So it has lots of affirmations, things you say at different stages of a psychedelic experience in order to evoke the best aspects of it. Also, I came up with the concept of set and setting. So set is your mindset, what your mind is like and what your expectation is. If you feel fearful going into a psychedelic experience, you're more likely to have a fearful experience. It will amplify any kind of pre-existing feelings. But also the setting, how you set your environment up in order to have a psychedelic experience. You know, the right number of people to have, 7 people he reckons is the right number of people to have in a group. And then also guidelines for dosages on lots of different substances like LSD and DMT. So, liberation through hearing during intermediate stage. That was, let me see, the experience of, yeah, I'll just give you one quote. A psychedelic experience is a journey into new realms of consciousness. The scope and content of the experience is limitless, but its characteristic features are the transcendence of verbal concepts, of space-time dimensions, and of the ego and identity. So that's what Timothy Leary says about it. Right, so the 3 phases that he talks about. The first phase is called the Chikhai Bardo, and this term comes from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Right, so this is the first phase of a psychedelic experience. So this is the stage, the transcendent stage, right? So what's happening at this point is a term you might have heard of called ego death. So the part of the brain that is you, or you identify with your thoughts, your emotions, your memories and stuff, that part goes away during the psychedelic experience. It's also known as the default mode network in your brain. It's like your self-critical and self-analytical part of your brain that deals with you, your interaction with other people, your roles, your relationship to everything. That part of it kind of like gets dissolved during the psychedelic experience, and you exist in the state of pure awareness and pure consciousness. Some of the things that can happen, people feel a deep sense of connectivity to others and the rest of existence. I remember myself having an acid trip last summer in the forest in Wicklow with some friends. There was lots of flies around, and the flies were buzzing all around me and landing on me and consuming me. And I felt very privileged that the flies were taking nourishment for me, and I felt a deep sense of connection to them. I felt that I was those flies. We were all one. This is the feeling that people have, the deep feeling of connected. People feel connected to the cycle of life and death, right? This is why experiences in nature are to be prized. People can experience their life's journey. You know, they can see themselves outside of this reality and kind of see their life's journey and maybe sometimes the reasons why they make some of the decisions in their life. Very often people end up coming back from this kind of experience with questioning. They question society, they question reality, they question their nature. A lot of these psychedelics are called entogenic. And an entogen is something that awakens the divine within. So people get the sense of their own will, their own consciousness as being the most fundamental thing in existence. And this can be a really profoundly emotionally moving, experience for people to have, this Chikhai Bardo stage of the psychedelic experience. Timothy Leary describes it as the state of primordial or unmodified consciousness. Everything that you think you are is gone, but you're still there and you're still aware. So it's a time of great revelation. Let me just give you one quote, right? Merged with all life, you may feel yourself floating down and into a warm sea. Your individuality and autonomy of movement are mostly disappearing. Your control is surrendered to the total orgasm. Blissful organism. It feels like an orgasm, some of them. Blissful passivity, ecstatic, orgiastic, undulating unity. All worries and concerns are washed away. All is gained and everything is giving up. So in a way you lose yourself, but you gain something else as well. Let me see if there's something else I can say here. A quote. Let me see. I'll give you, Terence McKenna describes that as an energetic, astronomical, celestial, self-contemplating, self-realizing event. Yeah, a great metaphor for this phase of the psychedelic experience is this comic, which is called Big Les. It's a cartoon. Has anyone seen it? Okay, you can check it out on YouTube. I love Big Les, right? So Big Les is written by, or it's made by Tom Hollis, Jared Wright, and Isaac Weir. And it's basically it's drawn in MS Paint, right? And in this experience, one of the characters, Big Les, they all go to this island called Chumba Island. They discover these psychedelic mushrooms called blue meanies, and they go on a psychedelic trip. And Big Les sees himself being drawn in MS Paint and has the realization that he could draw himself. I think this is a great metaphor for this phase of a psychedelic experience. The second phase of a psychedelic experience, I'm going to start some video here and a little bit of audio for this, is described in the book as, it's called the Croniad Bardo, right? And the Croniad Bardo in the Tibetan Book of the Dead is visions of the various Buddha forms or the nearest approximations. Let's see if I can get some sound going here. There's no sound coming out. No problem. If it doesn't work, I'll just explain, right? Timothy Leary describes these as karmic apparitions, right? So these types of karmic, this is the visionary stage of the psychedelic experience. And during this visionary stage, you're going to see a lot of things, the vision. This is the part of the psychedelic experience that maybe is most commonly known about, right? This is the visionary stage when people are getting visual and auditory hallucinations. These kind of change depending on the substance, right? For something like LSD, there's a sort of harmonic quality to the visuals that people see. Sometimes pulsating light patterns. The edges of objects kind of become distorted in a really beautiful way. Sometimes people feel that they see things for the very first time. I remember looking into a spider's web. I think I just saw the spider's web, but in my experience, I had never really seen a spider's web before. It felt like the time had slowed down. It was like a Disney movie. It was like a Disney movie version of a spider's web. Hyper real. With substances like ayahuasca or the active ingredient is DMT, people see full-on visions. In other words, they're not going to see this reality at all. They're going to see a completely different reality, and this reality is almost like the astral plane or the Akashic record is another term people have heard. Like it's a realm of possibility where everything is possible and every vision is possible. Yeah, again, with something like DMT, people have an experience that they travel to a different dimension, almost as if their consciousness is tuning into a different reality or a different dimension. This vision or this visuals that I have here, this is from a facilitator who facilitates people to work with a substance called 5-MeO-DMT. It's probably the strongest psychedelic that we currently know about. It completely dissolves very quickly everything, so that you just exist in a state of pure awareness. What else can I say about this? Yeah, so this is, Martin Ball also makes this beautiful visionary art, which tries to convey something of what the experience looks like and sounds like, so the auditory and visual hallucinations that people experience. Let me see what else I can say here. Yeah, sometimes people experience synesthesia. Timothy Leary also talks about cultural archetypes. So I believe this is where visions of fairies and visions of spirits come from, the activity of DMT or 5-MeO-DMT or other psychedelic substances in the brain. Some of these, by the way, are actually produced by our brains naturally. They've been found in the blood and in human urine. Something like DMT, I don't know if you know this, but DMT exists abundantly in nature. You can get it in orange peels, you know, and even go to the Phoenix Park, you can smell DMT on some of the plants. Everything in nature produces DMT, this substance which can have a profound effect on human consciousness. A friend of mine described an acid trip recently. It was his first one. He said about 90% of what he saw was the acid trip and 10% was reality. So this is the second phase of the psychedelic experience, right? Let me see anything else I need to say. Close language. Okay, we'll go on to the third. Oh yeah, just to say, like, different artists have tried to convey what the visions are like. So this is Pablo Amaringo, and he's a Peruvian artist who works with the substance, he works with ayahuasca, you know, an ancient plant medicine which has been used for over 5,000 years by indigenous cultures in South America and around the world. And he draws some, or he tries to paint some of what the ayahuasca experience looks like for him. So this is Pablo Amaringo. These are some other of Pablo Amaringo's drawings. These are some drawings drawn by friends of mine from the Psychedelic Society. And again, they're trying to convey something of what their psychedelic experiences look like to them. So yeah, often you see these fractal patterns. Again, there's a mathematical theory for why these fractal patterns evolve. There's an article I read about why, in particular, these types of fractal visualizations are common. These are particularly common with mescaline. More fractals. The third phase of the psychedelic experience is called the Sid Pabardo. So the Sid Pabardo is when the psychedelic substance is kind of wearing off and the person is reintegrating back into their, what Timothy Leary calls game reality or game consciousness. In other words, you're back with your identity and your personality and this. And how you integrate the experience back into normal life is really critical, because you want to integrate the experience in a way which has a positive effect on your everyday life. I put this artist's work here on these slides. This is Alexander Gray. And Alexander Gray paints these visionary art pieces which are designed to be looked at during the Sid Pabardo. Why? Because if you look at these, for example, in the closing hours of an acid trip, these are not static pictures. These are actually animated like books that you see in Harry Potter. Right? They actually come to life. They're moving. You know, there's flow in these images. These are more Alexander Gray paintings, right? And these are astonishing to look at on LSD. I don't know, I could go as far as to say that I think the psychedelic experience is every human being's birthright. I think everybody should experience these things, you know? Yeah, Terence McKenna says, like, making this stuff off limits is like making sex off limits. You know, people are going to find out about it. And I want people to find out about it, which is why I give these talks, you know? So what happens to the brain during the psychedelic experience is now being understood, because we have these MRI scans coming out of Imperial College in London where they basically give people a placebo, give people, for example, LSD, or they give them DMT. There's a study going on now, and they actually study people's brains to understand what happens, and it's really interesting because this maybe underlies or helps to explain why people get this sense of oneness, transcendence, connection to, you know, timeless feeling of connection to the rest of existence. And the top scans are normal human brains or human brain on a placebo. The bottom scans there are human brains on LSD. So what happens is the neural network that forms your consciousness is altered profoundly. Most psychedelic substances work on the serotonin receptors in the brain. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. So serotonin is how your brain's neural network works, right? So the neurons are communicating by sending serotonin to each other. During a psychedelic experience, the network is disrupted because the psychedelic substance is also interfering or working with, or what's the word I'm looking for, perturbed by the psychedelic substances. And your default mode network, activity in your default mode network, which is like your game consciousness, everyday reality, is reduced. But the brain is in a hyper-connected state, so your imaginary part, your visual cortex, everything is all connected up and working. People have, or the researchers have compared this to the way a child's brain is. It's an unformed brain. And it's almost like a dream-like kind of consciousness. The barriers between the visual cortex and the information-carrying regions of the brain are broken down. This maybe describes or explains how the complex hallucinations arrive. There's lots of other theories for that. Much more activity across the whole brain. You're seeing with the whole brain. Some of the research that's coming out now on therapeutic, why you would want to do this, there's lots of potential therapeutic reasons why you would want this to happen. And I'll just give you the title of some of the papers which were presented at the Psychedelic Science Conference recently. So, principles of evaluating the efficacy of ayahuasca-assisted treatment for substance dependency, treating alcohol-related disorders with ayahuasca. This could really snap somebody out of, say, repeated patterns of behavior. And people basically, when they come back, they don't have these patterns anymore. Treating cluster headaches with psychedelics. Let's see what else. Psychedelic use to reduce suicidality. Use for example, anxiety. End of life anxiety can very often be profoundly healed when people have a psychedelic experience. And there's some research and there's a study done with the use of psilocybin on end of life anxiety. These are just some visualizations of the brain connectivity during, on the left hand side, normal brain connectivity, on the right hand side, this is during, with psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. The brain is in a hyper-connected state during a psychedelic experience. I think a great metaphor for the psychedelic experience, and I'm going to rob this one from Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse Tyson says, confining our perception of nature to visible light is like listening to music in one octave. So if we stay in game consciousness all the time, we're going to perceive a certain level of depth to this reality, right? And this is what the universe looks like if you look at it with your eyes, right? You can see the universe is vast and beautiful. We can perceive so much of the universe. But if we look at the universe in the infrared level, then there's much more information. There's much more information that is revealed, right? So, and if you go to the microwave level, let me see what I can say here. Yeah, this is a microwave level. Then you can see all the way back to the origin of the universe, because there's still a lot of microwave radiation around in the universe. So in other words, if we allow our consciousness to be open and we allow ourselves to see reality with our full brain, then much more of reality can be revealed to us. Neil deGrasse Tyson says, these are not just ways of seeing the same thing. These other kind of light reveal objects and phenomena, different objects and phenomena in the cosmos. In gamma ray light, for example, we can see mysterious explosions in distant galaxies that we would otherwise miss. And in microwave light, we can see all the way back to the birth of the universe. We have only just opened our eyes. So that's Terence McKenna's map of the psychedelic experiences. There are others. There's this guy called Dakota Winch. I just watched one of his YouTube videos yesterday, and he talks about the 4 levels of ego death. And maybe I'll just skip on because I'm going to run out of time. But it's well worth looking at it. This is another map of what the psychedelic experiences can be. And then also Timothy Leary has the 5 levels of consciousness. And he made a record in, I think it was 1965, Message to the Youth of America, where he describes the 5 levels of consciousness. Interestingly, I fully buy this, by the way. There's a researcher, a guy called Kalindi Lee, who's a martial artist who I met at Azora, and he takes mega doses of mushrooms. The normal dose is 5 dried grams. He takes up to 60 dried grams of magic mushrooms. So he's a really brave man. He's mapping the psychedelic space at those really high doses of mushrooms. He believes that he can access the info-particle realm. So really, really below the Planck's constant, and he reckons he can perceive the programming and the code that actually creates this reality. So I'll buy this, because this is, you're still conscious, you're still awake, you're still aware, but everything else is stripped back, so you just exist as a pure consciousness. This is Jeremy Narby's book, The Cosmic Serpent, and he actually has a theory for how plants are able to communicate with us at the DNA level during the psychedelic experience. And this is maybe to explain how some of these indigenous populations have deep knowledge of the interactions of plants and how to heal with plants that we are only now discovering, with our conscious brains. There are lots of other ways to achieve altered states of consciousness. I'm just going to mention a few of them here. Meditation, Tibetan Bun Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Tai Chi and Qigong, running, group singing, tantric sex, flow states, or holotropic breath work. Holotropic breath work was invented by Stan Graf. We did 4,000 therapeutic LSD sessions with people before LSD became banned. for use in that context. And he developed a technique called holotropic breathwork, which involves music, a really particular setting, and also a particular breathing technique. And you can achieve a profoundly healing altered state of consciousness using holotropic breathwork. Sitting silently in nature and trying to still your thoughts. So there's lots of ways to achieve, states of consciousness which are similar to the psychedelic experience, but I think there's no substitute for taking the substance. And also, not everybody's got 20 years to go learn meditation techniques. You can have a DMT experience, or you can have a 12-hour acid trip, and you can have a lot of information. You can have a life-changing experience, right? And this is something that's open to everybody. So, let's see, what else do I need to say here? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, let's move on. Yeah, I'm just going to mention briefly some substances, right? And then I'm going to start talking about virtual reality, and I'll make this hopefully the connection for you, right? There are lots of different psychedelic substances, and they all have different effects. Some of them take effect, with something like DMT or 5-MeO-DMT. As soon as you inhale the substance, by the time you exhale, you're in a deep scientific, psychedelic altered reality for the duration of your experience, which can last between 10 and 30 minutes. This is something you can have on your lunch break, right? You can also do something like acid. You can do something like acid. I'm having these things, and the interesting thing is, I'm certain that within 10, 15 years, these types of experiences will become much more commonplace. Terence McKenna has this theory that we need to reconnect with our archaic selves. We need to have a more harmonious relationship with nature. And if you think about it, there's so much fucked up stuff in the world right now. The fact that the planet might be uninhabitable in 100 years' time, that should really profoundly, that's the thing we need to be thinking about, right? That your grandchildren may not have a planet to live on. That's pretty serious. Look at our relationship with animals, and how we treat animals as if they're just like the same as a chair. They're not consciousnesses, That's something that we need to change if we want to basically evolve to a higher level. If we want to move on as a species, we need to look at these things. And Terence McKenna believes the only way is if we take psychedelics and reconnect with our archaic selves and drop all of the thinking. But there are lots of different substances, right? San Pedro, DMT, Changa. Many of these, by the way, have thousands of years of safe therapeutic use in human civilizations and human cultures. For example, ayahuasca, at least 5,000 years. Looking at something like psilocybin mushrooms. Psilocybin mushrooms, there's no preparation required. You don't need to boil anything. So the use of psilocybin and the use of magic mushrooms predates the wheel, predates the invention of fire. So organisms have been eating psilocybin mushrooms for millions of years. They're perfectly safe. Psilocybin is perfectly safe to give to a child. It has no side effects, and the body just processes it naturally. Okay, I'm just going to show you this really short video. I'm not going to go too long. There is a substance called 5-MeO-DMT, which comes from the toad called the Sonoran desert toad. And this, in my opinion, is the strongest psychedelic that you can ever possibly experience. It's a transcendental, ultimate human experience. It is like, someday maybe you guys have children, maybe you're going to, have a fantastic holiday, human beings will land on the moon. It's nothing compared to the experience of taking 5-MeO-DMT. It's nothing compared to the experience of toad medicine. When everything is stripped back and you exist in a state of pure, unmodified, primordial energy. And you just experience the energy coming from your senses directly. You're an energy being for the duration here. And this is my experience last summer with Geraldo Sandoval, a gynecologist from Mexico who now goes around the world facilitating people to have experiences with this really transformative, powerful and wonderful life-enhancing medicine. Okay, so I'll just move on. Alright, VR and psychedelics. I could show you the whole lot of it, but there's a lot of stuff goes on there. But, let me see. What is the connection between VR and psychedelics? Okay, so I'm a VR developer, right? So I want to try and sort of see how all of this stuff and all this knowledge that I've been gaining, how is this kind of influencing my kind of practice and my thinking about VR and having all these VR experiences and programming and stuff? Well, so I think there's three ways that the psychedelic experience can be conveyed through immersive virtual reality. First of all, I think VR experiences can convey to people who are not on a psychedelic what a psychedelic experience looks like and sounds like. So that's the first level. Second of all, I think psychedelics, or VR, can convey something of psychedelic consciousness. So the feeling of oneness, deep connectivity, and the healing that occurs with psychedelics, right? And the third way is that I think virtual reality can awaken people to aspects of their true nature. So can really reveal to us, something about what it is to be a human being. So there are the three ways. Let me see, what else can I say here? Yeah, psychedelics, VR should make us question the nature of reality and egoic social structures. Let me see, what else can I say here? Dissolving the boundaries. Yeah, Terence McKenna believed, and he wrote about it in the Archaic Revival, he got to try VR. He died in the mid-90s, but he got to try VR, and he wrote about it extensively in the Archaic Revival, and he imagined that people would use VR to basically record their trips and basically show them to other people. So, okay, let me see what we're going to talk about here. Okay, so here are some VR projects that I think convey the first thing. In other words, the psychedelic aesthetic, right? This first project is called Lortasia, and this is a virtual reality sculpture. It was developed by Oscar-winning visual effects artist Kevin Mack. And this is a toy, right? This is basically, you just explore this sculpture, and textured onto the sculpture are these evolving visions, evolving sort of patterns, right? Why I think this conveys something of maybe what an acid trip looks like, or even some of the DMT visuals, is because he evokes this technique called pareidolia. And pareidolia is this thing that happens in the human brain where people identify patterns even though there's nothing there, So for example, if I drew two circles and a line like this, everyone would see a face. So when you look at these evolving patterns on the texture of this 3D sculpture, sometimes you see human faces, sometimes you see dogs, you just see like whatever, particularly if you can just let your mind go. So I think this project conveys something of what a VR experience, psychedelic experience can kind of look like. Next of all is this project, and this project is called Horizons. And I met the developer of this project called Owen Hindley at a festival or a conference called Resident. It's a creative coding conference that takes place in Belgrade every year. It brings together artists and computer scientists, people who are basically using technology to, as I say, express themselves. And the nice thing about this is it incorporates a lot of synesthesia. So there's music, and you choose the music track, but the music basically is used to generate the environment around you, and it changes the colours, and the experience kind of evolves based on the music. So it has this lovely synesthesia aspect. I'm going to give you a quote from Terence McKenna. He says, "The more extreme, inventive, and avant-garde of VR constructions are likely to resemble experiences with psychedelic plants, rather than conventionalized forms of art. The doorway to realms of dreams and unconscious will be opened, and what will be merely symbolic representations of eccentric individual experience will become the experience itself." So that's what Terence McKenna says. And I think it really expresses something very nice about this particular VR experience. All right, this next experience, this is called microdose. Okay, so it's actually named after a psychedelic concept, right? It's called microdose. And this was developed by a visionary artist called Android Jones. So at Azora, Android Jones' art was displayed in the gallery. It's really cool at the Azora. People take psychedelics and then they go into this gallery, and there's basically lots of visionary art, and these of course look astonishing when a person takes, like, for example, LSD or 2CB or psychedelic, which is going to evoke some visual hallucinations. But this is a platform for live mixing and VJing. So this is designed to be used, say for example, at an electronic music event. So somebody's going to wear the VR headset and the setup, and it's basically going to evolve this visionary art, as the music is actually unfolding, and then people can enjoy it. One of the other collaborators on this is a guy called Evan Blutek. And Evan Blutek is one of my favorite electronic music producers. And he produces a lot of visionary-inspired electronic music as well. Really profound and really beautiful music. So he says, Android Jones says of this project, he says, it enables participants to alter their own minds co-creatively and intuitively while expanding the limits of human cognition, audio, and visual perception. Participants can break through personal creative limits using physical movement, art, and music to create a unique, interactive, and cutting-edge VR experience. Could somebody just let me know how I'm doing on time, by the way? I've got 10 minutes. Awesome. That's really good. Nice to know. Excellent. Okay, so this is a project. I'm going to maybe scoot through these, probably took too much time talking about psychedelics. This is a project called Wave, right? this is an awesome project. This allows people to rave together around the world. So you put on your VR headset and you look around and there's all people dancing around you, but they're actually with their VR headsets around the world. There's also a role in this project for the VJ and for the DJ who could do live mixing in VR. And one of the reasons why I love this project as well is that you can buy trips in it. So you pick up these coins around the environment and then you go buy a trip from a machine. You can't do the trip by yourself, you have to share it with somebody else. So you get this thing you put on somebody else's head and then they experience a nice little kind of psychedelic visual for a few minutes. So I think it's a really cool project. It's called the Wave VR. This is a project, this is called Gnosis, and this is by my friend, he's called Robotron. You can Google him. I'm not too sure if he has a real name, but that's what I call him. And that's what he calls himself. Now let's see if the video is going to play here. Hopefully it's going to play. What's going on here? Okay. Yeah, so this he calls this a VR art project. What this is a force-directed graph of concepts. And at the very start of the experience, the force-directed graph, all the concepts are kind of in one thing, and then they all explode outwards. So you have this experience of kind of stepping outside your mind. This is why I love it, right? And you can see all the concepts and how they're kind of interrelated. Also incorporates lots of sort of psychedelic visuals, and also there's a lovely synesthesia, so the music evolves into kind of beautiful visual aspects. Yeah, you can get this for the Oculus Rift now, so I guess maybe we're going to see a bit of the force-directed graph here, and then I'll move quickly on. So it's called Gnosis. He describes it as like, it's like an acid trip experience. Yeah, or an audio sculpture, yeah, the waveform matches the sounds. This was actually the Amaze, which is a big international video games and art conference. This was the Amaze Grand Finalist, one of the Amaze Grand Finalists this year. So like I say, it's the idea of kind of stepping outside of your mind and looking at your mind. Okay, I'll skip on. So now I'm going to talk about, they're ones that I think evoke aspects of, in fact, Robotron's one, the last one, I think also evokes something of psychedelic consciousness. But these projects, I think, really evoke psychedelic consciousness, right? This is a project called Sound Self, and it's developed by a guy called Robert Arnott. And it's inspired by an acid trip he had at the Burning Man Festival. Have you guys heard of Burning Man? Burning Man's a big kind of psychedelic festival. It takes place in the desert in Nevada. So how this works, right, is you hum into the microphone. And, you know, again, mantra meditation and humming and stuff like that is a way to still the mind, to stop the kind of brain chatter and just kind of exist in a state of pure awareness. So this is evoking some aspects of like what it feels like to take a psychedelic. And when you hum, the sound gets reflected back at you in kind of all kinds of beautifully distorted ways. And also this really trippy LSD-like vision gets created. You know, and every time you have this experience, it's different. This is a video of one of my sessions with Sound Self. So, and also you can hear also what Sound Self sounds like. You know, this is me humming into the microphone, and then this is what I hear back. You know, so my entire senses are full of the sound that I'm making. My head is full of it, and maybe sort of conscious thought kind of still. You know, so that's Sound Self. Alright, this is my own project. This is the project that I've spent, when I say it's my project, I really mean this is a collaborative project that we work on as a team, and this is called Deep. So this is the breathing meditation project that I mentioned. So how this works is you wear the breathing sensor, you get the experience, it feels like you're deep sea diving, right? So when you inhale, it controls your buoyancy, exhale, then you're going to sink down lower, alright? And it's a little psychedelic journey, right? So you start off in a cave, there's a big open space, and there's lots of creatures that you're going to interact with throughout your psychedelic journey. What we're trying to do is get people to stop thinking and connect very strongly to their breath and to their breathing during this experience. It's invented by my great friend and colleague Owen Harris. Nicky Schmidt is the guy who does all of the visuals and the art, and then Andy Mooney is the audio sound designer for the project. I just basically program all of the creatures in this experience. So all of the fish that you see here, I programmed all of their movements and behaviors. There's lots of parts of the world that will respond to your breathing. So you can see those lights there. They basically glow whenever you inhale. And this is a really amazingly powerful feeling when you're traveling through that tunnel and everything's glowing around you. The interesting thing about this project is it works. It actually works. It really makes you feel calm. It's really good for relieving anxiety. anxiety and for bringing you very present, even though you have to wear loads of equipment. You know, it's a very presence-inducing experience. It's like a psychedelic experience, and people come back after it. Sometimes people are crying. You know, it's really amazing for me to bring this project to festivals and see the reaction that it has from people. It's a really powerful kind of feeling. Yeah. Okay. So let me then move on to the third thing, right? And maybe just talk about the last project. And this last project I'm going to talk about is called Forums. And I'm going to show you a small video of this project at the end, but I just want to talk to you about how I came to make this project, right? So while I was programming deep, right, I wanted to make something that I could create loads of different creature behaviors in an environment to test them out before having to get like 3D models created. This is the room in the new house that we moved into that I did all my work in. I was really lucky to have this room where I could do yoga, I had my VR stuff, I could stand-up coding here. And I developed a really interesting work practice. So what I would do is I would go running. Sometimes I go like for 10 or 15k runs. I always bring my phone with me, listening to epic music. And I find myself thinking about this world that I was trying to create. And I have all these profound realizations of how the creatures were going to be connected together. How they were going to avoid obstacles, you know, how the tentacles were going to be like basically controlled by the speed of the head and stuff. So I feel for me that this part really reflected or really felt for me like the first phase of a psychedelic experience. It was the phase of profound realization. And then I would come back into my room and I would code all these creatures. And I would put on my VR headset and lo and behold, they'd start swimming around me. All these amazing things, they came right from inside me. They came right from my deepest inner thoughts and emotions, right? All these creatures in this world just kind of came out. So this then felt to me like the second phase of a psychedelic experience. And then the third phase of a psychedelic experience, how did I integrate this? Very often I would work on these projects, work on deep or work on forums, and I would find myself looking at the stuff I had made afterwards with a really profound sense of awe that I had made a beautiful thing. And I'm not an artist, I'm a programmer. So I had this amazing feeling of making beautiful things, an amazing feeling of what it meant to be an artist. And I feel that VR has awakened me to my creative self. I now have this ability inside me to create these beautiful things that I never realized I had. So this is kind of what Forums looks like. I also had lots of self-doubt and dark moments, but when I looked at the stuff I had done, it made me feel astonished and it made me feel a great sense of awe. I learned as I went. You know, this is what Forums look like. These are some of my jellyfish. These are inspired by tardigrades, and these are beautiful kind of backflipping movements. This is something that's inspired by the toad medicine. It's just a sort of a beautiful kind of creature. You know, lots of jellyfish, lots of these things. You can climb on the back of these. Amazing feeling I had. Cool. When I climbed on the back of one of these creatures for the first time, and it actually took me on a journey around this world that I created. You can use the Vive controllers to control the creatures if you're like riding on the back of a massive big animal, you know, or on a dragon that's flying through the air. I made that. That came from inside me. You know, that's a really powerful feeling to actually do that. And then lots of beautiful schools of things. I'm going to skip on here because I'm running out of time. And I'll just show you this small movie just to conclude, right? Terence McKenna got to try VR in the early 90s and he wrote about it in the Archaic Revival. And he thought in VR we could be whatever we wanted to be. And he said he wanted to be an octopus. He didn't want to be a human. He wanted to shed the monkey body. Turn this down here. And I'm going to read you directly from Terence McKenna here. He said, this is because squids and octopi have perfected a form of communication that is both psychedelic and telepathic, a model for human communication in the future. In the not-too-distant future, men and women may shed the monkey body to become virtual octopi swimming in a silicon sea. Octopi have a large repertoire of colour changes, dots, blushes, and travelling bars that move across their surfaces. This ability, in combination with the soft-bodied physique of the creatures, allows it to obscure and reveal its linguistic intent by simply rapidly unfolding different parts of its body. The octopus does not transmit its linguistic intent. In other words, octopuses don't speak, right? Instead, an octopus becomes its linguistic intent. Whenever it wants to communicate, it just is its communication, because it expresses it through its movement and through the colours on its body. Terence McKenna says, like the octopus, our destiny is to become what we think, to have our thoughts become our bodies, in the same way that the thoughts, the code, became this world around me. This is because this is the essence of the more perfect logos, a logos not heard but beheld. Alright, so that's the octopus. I plan to make control of an octopus in this experience where you can become the octopus and have your physical movements reflected in its movements. So that kind of concludes my talk about psychedelics and virtual reality. If you want to know more about me, I have a blog. If you want to know more about Deep, you can check out Explore Deep. I have some psychedelic playlists on Spotify, or you can follow me on Twitter. And thank you very much for listening to my talk. Questions? Yeah.
At the social step in terms of marriage equality, and hopefully next year we're going to have the next social step in terms of abortion rights, how far off do you think Ireland is for the social step in terms of liberalisation of drugs?
That's a really good question. I mean, I would be hopeful and say maybe it wouldn't take as long as the marriage equality thing. I mean, that took 20 years, so I'd be hoping maybe 10 years. I think cannabis kind of leads the way in this, you know. Many people are discovering the medical benefits of cannabis. Like, I think if you've any older person with arthritis or general aches and pains, you know, there are certainly people who would benefit a lot from cannabis medicine. I mean, I imagine a future in Ireland when all the churches are turned into centres for psychedelic therapy and healing, and you can basically go and have a guided psychedelic experience. I think that would be a lovely way for Irish society to evolve. And instead of all of our culture revolving around the corrosive influence of alcohol on human thought and human interaction, you know, it stupefies, and it also, you know, it makes people dumb and heightens the emotions in a way which I don't think is good for us as a species. It makes us more drama, you know. I'd love to see, like, culture revolve around, for example, people going out into the forest and taking magic mushrooms together and having these transcendental experiences. But, I mean, I don't know, 10, 20 years probably, but I'm very hopeful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Trying to spread the message, you know.
I enjoyed that. Well,
thank you.
You talked about doing a 15K run, coming back, it being like stage 1, stage 2, designing then like you going on this journey where you're replicating without LSD, the experience of LSD, let's say. Why not just take LSD?
I've done that many times as well.
But what I'm saying is it that you want to get to a point, or get us to a point where we're trying to, you know, get there without taking LSD, or is that an issue?
No. I mean, I guess, like, if you're, you know, I'm going to give you the head fake for this talk, you know, there's no point in saying it. I want everybody to take psychedelics. I want everybody to learn about psychedelics, right? I want everybody to stop drinking alcohol and to start, like, looking at these other things which are much safer and, you know, raise people's consciousness and make people feel a sense of oneness. I think it's, you know, Terence McKenna often talks about it being the birthright of human beings. It's the birthright of human beings to have these transcendental experiences. That's my head fake. But I'm using VR and virtual reality and stuff basically to try and, you know, spread the message about psychedelic consciousness. Yeah. But I also feel that, you know, that journey for me, you know, another thing about Timothy Leary's book, it's basically, I think, a way to have any experience, and make it a transcendental experience and integrate it positively into your life. So even coding those creatures for me paralleled the stuff that I had read in Timothy Leary's famous book from 1964. Yeah. Hey.
It's probably too late for a practical session, Brian, but maybe next year you could do a control group and, you know, there could be a sort of set exercise with a control group being given the same question and after trying out the psychedelics, some of the volunteers answer the same question. I think it would be an interesting exercise if there were any volunteers.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to do that. Yeah, hopefully, you know, maybe it's not next year. Hopefully it's yeah, I'd love that. That would be really cool. Great idea. Yeah. 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 So we're up to within the next year that will be available for free on Steam. So anyone will be able to download it. And if you have, there'll be lots of different versions of it, you know, where we'll use lots of different ways to do the breathing. For example, there's movement sensors that come with the voice headset, so we'll be able to do like physical gestures, Qigong meditations, basically, which will map onto the breathing, and maybe even just like holding the space bars and breathe. So we're working on lots of different ways to make this available for people, and it'll be available for free. Yeah. why do people freak out in psychedelics? Yeah. You're talking about what people will call, say, a bad trip. Okay, so maybe just say a couple of things on that. First of all, in our community, we don't really talk about bad trips, we talk about challenging experiences. Sometimes when your brain is in that hyper-connected state, you may become aware of things which you're not comfortable dealing with, you know. Generally with stuff like ayahuasca, sometimes like the things that you see, you need to, I think it's how you integrate those experiences back into your life afterwards, you know, what the psychedelic has shown you. But also, I think why people sometimes have challenging psychedelic experiences that they're not expecting is because they don't look after those two important things of set and setting. A psychedelic is not like if you take, for example, if you drink alcohol, it's going to make you feel a certain way, right? Or if you snort cocaine, or if you take an ecstasy pill or something like that. The psychedelic is going to depend very much on what your expectations are going in, and also what your setting is, right? So if you're taking it in a real noisy environment, if you've had a few pints beforehand, then you're more likely not to have a good experience with a psychedelic. So I think if you address those two things, then people won't have challenging experiences. But also, like I say, we talk about challenging experiences and what you can learn from a challenging experience. Sometimes those, what people call bad trips or challenging experiences, they're the ones that are most profound and they're the ones that are the most healing. So that would be my view. Yeah?
Yeah, two separate questions. One logistical one. Of all those substances that you listed, what's the legality of all of those? Are some freely available? And if they're not, is that always a struggle for you to be able to advocate that? And secondly, as someone who's not had a psychedelic experience, and I'm not sure whether that puts me in the in or out group in the audience.
Yeah, I can chat.
Can you control the experiences like you can with lucid dreaming, or you can do?
You can, but I mean, I would have friends, for example, who say that you shouldn't do psychedelics without having a meditative or a yoga practice. That basically, so there's a practice called Tibetan Bud Yoga. It's a shamanistic, intention-based practice that focuses on the chakras. In fact, any kind of meditative practice can sort of train you how to, you know, when you feel emotions or when stuff happens, can basically give you techniques to sort of like direct the experience in a positive way. So definitely. And yeah, they're all illegal, you know. They're illegal in Ireland as well, you know. Even, for example, now we're entering magic mushroom season and the country is abundant with free psychedelic plants which grow in nature, and they're absolutely, you know, for the most part, it's interesting. Just back to the challenging thing. You know, nobody takes a psychedelic and goes to, say, an A&E department or whatever because they have a physical problem. Psychedelics won't hurt you physically. What they might do is they might show you stuff which you might have difficulty processing. So it's all in your head. You know what I mean? So, like, for example, you can overdose on heroin. You can overdose on alcohol. You can't overdose on a psychedelic. You can take as much of them, like, that you will completely disintegrate your ego for a long duration of time. People do these. There's a thing called a thumbprint of LSD, so you're taking many thousands of times the dose required to have a psychedelic experience. People come back after it. Of course, they're permanently altered. Physically, they're fine, you know. But anyway, back to magic mushrooms. Magic mushrooms you can take in small doses of like up to maybe 1.5 grams. It's much better for you, you know, going out, you'll feel really happy, you'll be chatty, you'll get the giggles, you'll be fully, you know, able to socialize and stuff. The higher doses of magic mushrooms, then you're going to get the visionary stuff and the transcendental stuff. But yeah, they're all illegal. I mean, it's illegal to pick magic mushrooms in this country. It's illegal.
Only for humans, all the animals seem to
yeah, exactly. They get away with it, okay. But I mean, how do you make something like that? It's nonsense that something like that is illegal. And even the reason why it became illegal is completely nonsense. And the reason why most psychedelics became illegal is utterly nonsense as well. I mean, if you look at the 60s, you had counterculture, you had the Vietnam, all the stuff against the Vietnam War. People were kind of doing this dropping out of society, being really questioning of, like, you know, how culture is organized around profit and money and greed and alcohol and you know, all of these nonsense things that we're told to believe is why we're here, you know, consumption and production of economic goods, you know, supporting the society. You know, what about, like, and I think that was why there was this backlash against psychedelics in the 60s. It was just too radical for a culture to accept. I think now, because of the internet, because people are much more knowledgeable and people can get information directly, I think there's good possibility that this third wave of the psychedelic revolution is going to be the one that kind of sticks and has maybe permanent change, or causes like maybe good permanent changes to culture and to people as well. So that's just a note on like the illegality and why things became illegal, you know. But they're all pretty much illegal. But interestingly, if you take some of the plant medicines like ayahuasca and toad medicine, these are medicines that have been used by indigenous cultures for thousands of years, and the facilitators and the shamans from these countries are looking at what's going on in the world and saying, we need to do something about this. And they're coming out of these cultures, and they're basically running ayahuasca sessions, therapeutic and healing sessions for people all over the world now, you know. So that's what's happening. So I reckon that's it. Thank you very much, everybody.